Hi there, good to be back. Today we shall be reading Chapter 21, Siege of Ayodhya. The cool northerly wind was a welcome relief for Shiva as he sat on the deck of the lead ship with Gopal, Sati and Kali clustered around him. As the 56-vessel armada made steady progress upriver, he knew that in just a few weeks they would reach close to the headwaters of the Chambal, from where the soldiers would disembark and march to the Narmada. Panditji, do your ships that wait for us at the Narmada have the additional capacity to carry the 55,000 soldiers who accompany us? Asked Kali. Yes, Your Highness, said Gopal. Our ships have been specially designed to handle this additional load since we knew that we would not be able to use the ships we are currently on. Judging by the maps we have seen, said Sati, we should reach Lothal in 3 months, right Panditji? Yes, Satiji, said Gopal. If the winds favor us, we may even make it earlier. Have you received word from the Lothal governor, Kali? Asked Shiva. My ambassador will be waiting with the information at the Narmada, answered Kali. Trust me, we will gain easy entry into Lothal, but don't expect a huge addition of troops into our army. Lothal doesn't have more than 2,000 or 3,000 soldiers. We don't really need their soldiers, said Shiva. We have enough troops of our own. Along with the Vasudev army that waits for us at the Narmada, your own Naga army and this Branga force, we have more than 100,000 men. That's equal to the strength of the Meluhan army. We can easily defeat them, said Kali. I do not intend to attack, said Shiva. I think you should. All we need to do is destroy the Somras manufacturing facility, Kali. But you have the Nagas with you. You shouldn't be afraid of a direct confrontation. I'm not afraid. I just don't see the sense in it. It will distract us from our main purpose, the destruction of the Somras. We do not want to destroy Meluha, don't forget that. I will count on you to remind me of that every time I forget, said Kali. Shiva smiled and shook his head. The voyage up the Sarayu had been surprisingly uneventful. The Magadhans did not attack Ganesh's ships. The massive convoy was so long that the guards on the Magadhan towers spent an entire day watching ships go by. A little over a week later, Ganesh ordered his ships to weigh anchor. Kartik, Bhagirath, Chandraketu and Ganesh got into a small boat and rowed ashore. The forest had been cleared up to a fair distance. Divodas, the leader of the Branga immigrants in Kashi, waited there along with 20 men. Ganesh jumped off as soon as the boat beached and waded through the shallow water to the river bank. The others followed. He touched his head on the ground as he reached the shore. He looked deep into the forest, remembering a long time ago when he had hidden behind the trees and observed his mother. Kartik, this is the Bal Atibal Kund. This is where Saptarishi Vishwamitra taught Lord Ram his legendary skills. Kartik's eyes were wide open in awe. He bent down and touched the ground with his hand and whispered, Jai Shri Ram. The others around him repeated it, Jai Shri Ram. Kartik, said Ganesh, this ground was blessed by Saptarishi Vishwamitra and Lord Ram. But its greatness has been forgotten by many. We may have to redeem the honor of this land with blood. Kartik took a moment to understand. Do you think Surapadman might chase us? Ganesh smiled. He will chase us, trust me. I see the siege of Ayodhya as a bait to draw Surapadman out of Magad. Once he is out, we will destroy his army and capture his city. We'll be able to stop Ayodhyan ships easily with Magad blockading the Ganga. And the battle to decide the fate of Magad should be fought here, for this is where I would like you to attack him. I would have thought that Surapadman would prevail on his father. He's a clever man, Kartik. For what I have understood, his instinct was to support us, but in the face of so much opposition. He will do what is now in his best interest, and he does have much to gain. He will win the favor of his father and his countrymen by taking revenge for his brother's death. He will come as the savior for Ayodhya, albeit a little late so that Ayodhya is weakened. And who knows, he may even capture the sons of the Nilkant. Wouldn't that make him a strong ally of Vrigu? Asked Ganesh with an ironic smile. Yes, brother, he will attack, and we will learn that clever men should always listen to their instincts. Kartik took a deep breath and looked up at the sky before turning back to Ganesh, with resolve writ large in his eyes. We will turn the river red with blood, Dada. Bhagirath looked at Kartik with a familiar sensation of fascination and fear. Why this ground, Lord Ganesh? Asked Chandraketu. Your Highness, answered Ganesh, as you can see, this stretch is long and narrow. That will lure Surapadman into anchoring his ships along the banks, thus stretching his army thin. The forest is not too far from the shore, which means our main army can remain hidden behind the trees. We will leave only a small contingent on the beach. Bhagirath smiled. That will be a very juicy bait. Surapadman will probably imagine that this is a small brigade that has deserted the siege of Ayodhya. He will want to kill them to give his soldier a taste of victory. Right, said Ganesh. But the main battle will not be on land. We just have to pin him down here, which will, in all honesty, take a lot of courage, since he will have a large force. This is why I want Kartik here. But Surapadman will be defeated in the river itself. How? Asked Chandraketu. I will move back from Ayodhya and ram his ship from the front, said Ganesh. I have also asked King Matali to wait in the Sharda river along with 30 ships. The Sharda meets the Sarayu downriver. The Vaishali fleet will sail up the Sarayu once Surapadman's ship has passed, placing them behind the Magadhans. My contingent will attack from in front, while the Vaishali forces will hit them from the behind. Kartik has to hold Surapadman in position for long enough to make his fleet of ships immobile. He will be sandwiched between King Matale's ships and yours, said Chandraketu. He won't stand a chance. Exactly. Sounds like a good plan, said Bhagirath. The success of the battle hinges on 2 points, said Ganesh. Firstly, Kartik has to entice Surapadman to anchor his ships and attack our soldiers on shore. In the absence of that, he will keep moving, and his larger boats will ram through my smaller ships and possibly turn the tide in his favor. Our ships are light, maneuverable, and built for speed. The Magadhan ships are bigger and have been built for strength. If Kartik fails to lure Surapadman ashore, my side of our fleet may face heavy casualties. I must be in command to take care of that possibility. And the second point? Asked Bhagirath. King Matali must be positioned to block Surapadman's escape back to Magad. That will close the prince a trap. Chandraketu doubted neither Kartik's courage nor his strategic mind. His words to the young warrior bespoke respect. You are on your own, Kartik. It's all up to you now. Kartik narrowed his eyes, his hand on his sword hilt. I will draw him in, King Chandraketu, and once I do, I assure you, I will obliterate his entire army myself. Our ships won't even be required to join the battle. Ganesh smiled at his brother. Ganesh reached for another document from the stack on the desk and began to read, then paused to rub his tired eyes. He was seated in his private cabin, surrounded by messages from his informants about the progress of the assault. There were dozens of missives telling him every aspect, from the mood of the Ayodhyan populace to the progress of the armourers in meeting the archers' demand for arrows. He had hardly slept in the weeks since the battle had begun, and his body ached for rest. But these reports could not wait. It appeared that Ayodhya stood poised on the brink of surrender, and any misstep now could spell disaster. Kartik and Chandraketu sat patiently by his side, assisting Ganesh with the endless stream of messages. The three sat together in silence as they awaited Bhagirath's return to hear news of his mission. The siege of Ayodhya had begun over a month ago. Ganesh's navy had assaulted the city in the classical manner of the ancient war manuals. A large part of the fleet had been anchored along the west banks of the Sarayu in a double line, out of the range of the catapults on the fort walls of the eastern banks. The lined ships had extended up to the north of Ayodhya, just shy of the sheer cliff upriver where the Sarayu descended in a waterfall. Small lifeboats have been tied to the right of the ships in Ganesh's convoy. With guards present round the clock, this was to prevent devil boats from attempting to set fire to the vessels from the Ayodhyan end. A section of army had camped to the left of the ships on the shore itself to thwart guerrilla attacks from the Ayodhyans. Farther to the south, Ganesh had anchored his ships and tied them together across the river in rows of 10. Another lineup was just behind the fast level of the blockade ships. Behind these, 5 fast-moving cutters would patrol the river farther downstream to attack any Ayodhyans who attempted to escape. Thus, any Ayodhyan ship attempting to run the river blockade had to battle through a thick line of 20 enemy ships and 5 quick cutters. The forest around Ayodhya had been cleared by the defending army to give it a clear line of sight in case of an attack. Prasenjit, the Meluhan brigadier who had been left behind by Vrigu, had tried hard to convince the Ayodhyans to extend the clearing area farther, but he had been unsuccessful. Ganesh had got his troops to cut a second line of tree beyond the clearing as a precautionary fire line. Once the outer fire line had been established, Ganesh had ordered that the trees within the 2 clearings be set aflame. The intense heat generated would have resulted in the collapse of any tunnels around Ayodhya that could have served as passages for food to be smuggled into the city. The fire had burnt for 4 continuous days and had had a demoralizing effect on the citizens of the impenetrable city, establishing the steely resolve of their blockaders. A cataract on a sheer cliff to the north of Ayodhya served as a natural barrier, which prevented ships from navigating farther round on the Sarayu. The Ayodhyans had built a channel into their walled shipyard just short of the cataract. The singular narrow channel of entry had been designed to be easily defendable. While this channel, passing through a gated wall, protected the Ayodhyan shipyard, it also allowed the enemy to block the exit route of their ships. Ganesh had used the leftover logs from the forest clearing to block this channel, effectively extending the siege of the city to the shipyard as well. All he wanted was to box them in, and blocking the channel had ensured that he did not have to divert too many ships to blockade the shipyard. Ganesh had known that the Meluhans had set up a bird courier system for the Ayodhyans. He had hit upon a very simple strategy to destroy this. He had placed 600 archers on various treetops outside Ayodhya and along the Sarayu. These archers worked in 8-hour shifts, changing 3 times a day, maintaining a continuous 24-hour vigil. The orders had been very simple: shoot any and every bird that they saw in the sky. Most of these dead birds were retrieved by the trackers. In doing so, not only did they retrieve messages exchanged between Meluha and Ayodhya, but the dead pigeons and the other game birds were also a source of fresh meat for the soldiers. Ayodhya drew fresh drinking water from the Sarayu through channels that extended from the river to within the city walls. The channels were fed by ingeniously designed giant water wheels constructed along the Sarayu. These wheels used the flow of the river to rotate. A series of buckets tied around the diameter would fill up with water and disgorge into the channels as they reached the top. Tall walls have been built around the wheels to protect them from any attack. However, there was a breach in the wall just below the water surface, from where the buckets filled with water. This opening was fortified with bronze bars that were wide enough to allow water to run through, but not so wide as to allow a man to swim in between. But that hadn't stopped Ganesh. Ganesh had deployed soldiers to swim across the Sarayu at night, pulling small, floating wooden barrels. Within these barrels were smaller iron cans filled with oil. Water in the space between the wooden barrel and the iron can, and a slow fuse made of hemp completed the device. The consequent pressure of escaping steam would cause an explosion, with the iron and wood themselves serving as shrapnel. The task of the skilled swimmers had been to strategically place the devices within the buckets of the water wheels, thus destroying them. The existing wells of Ayodhya could never quench the thirst of its innumerable residents. Ganesh had allowed a small number of non-combatant women and priests to come out of the city every day to draw small amounts of water for personal use. He had also ordered that this number be progressively reduced every day until the Ayodhyans surrendered. It was a slow squeeze designed to ultimately make the people rise against their leaders. Ganesh's soldiers had added to the psychological warfare by berating the emerging Ayodhyans for going against the wishes of their Nilkant and siding with Meluha. They had been informed that the only reason why Ganesh had refrained from shooting missiles into Ayodhya was so as not to harm innocent citizens who had had nothing to do with the decision of their emperor, Dilipa. The daily two-way traffic of some Ayodhyans had also served another important purpose. It had enabled the hidden Vasudev Pandit of the Ram Janmabhoomi temple to send an emissary to Ganesh with information collected from all the Vasudev Pandits from across the temples of India. After a couple of weeks, Ganesh had offered to send Bhagirath to meet with the nobles of his father's kingdom to reach a mutually acceptable compromise. The opportunity had been instantly grabbed by the Ayodhyans. Ganesh stretched his tired muscles and glanced at Kartik and Chandraketu seated beside him in the cabin. They also had hardly slept but masked their exhaustion and continued to pursue the documents. Ganesh smiled to himself. When this is done, he thought, we are all going to lock ourselves in our cabins and sleep for a week. There was the sound of footsteps and a brief knock at the cabin door before it was pushed open. Bhagirath bowed slightly to Ganesh, his hair slightly ruffled from the wind, before entering to take a seat with the three men. "What news, Bhagirath?" asked Ganesh, pushing the pile of messages to one side. "I'm afraid it's not good." "Really?" asked Chandraketu. "I thought the Ayodhyan army must be deeply divided. I cannot think of another reason why we were able to lay siege on the city so easily. No skirmishes, no guerrilla attacks, nothing. It could only mean that the army doesn't intend to fight." Bhagirath shook his head. "You don't know Ayodhya, King Chandraketu. It was not the cowardice of their army but the indecisiveness of their nobility which worked in our favor. They have not been able to agree on the best way to attack us. Furthermore, Maharishi Vrigu had brought in a Meluhan brigadier, Prasenjit, to oversee the Ayodhyan war preparations. All it achieved was further divisions within the city. By the time they agreed upon a strategy, we were already in control of the river. There was not much that they could have done after that." "So?" asked Ganesh. "Haven't their troubles opened the eyes of some at least?" "No," said Bhagirath. "There is tremendous confusion within the city. Many Ayodhyans are fanatical devotees of Lord Shiva. and are certain that the Nilkant will not harm them. They refuse to believe that he has ordered this attack. This blind devotion seems to be working against us. So who do they think has ordered this attack? Asked Chandraketu. Seeing the number of Brangas in the army, they think that it is you, said Bhagirath. Chandraketu raised his hand. Why would I attack Ayodhya? They believe that Branga wants to be the overlord of Swadweep, said Bhagirath. In the absence of Lord Shiva, there is nothing we can do to convince them otherwise. There are a few who do believe in the proclamation that was put up, but they are in a minority. They are outshouted by a very simple logic. We have never used the Somras, so why would the Nilkant attack us? He should attack Meluha. Of course, a few members of the nobility do use the Somras, but the people do not know that. It is the opinion of the nobility that is more important right now, said Karthik. The people do not control the army. So what do the nobles think? The nobility is sharply divided. Some of them actually want us to succeed, which would give them a plausible reason to refuse to help Meluha. Others believe surrendering will mean terrible loss of face. These people want the army to gallantly strike out and sail to Meluha, if only to prove to the rest of Swadweep that Ayodhya has the strength to do what it chooses to do. How do we assist those who do not want to come to the aid of Meluha? Asked Ganesh. It's difficult, said Bhagirath. My father made a brilliant move last week. He promised all of them a lifetime supply of the Somras. What? Yes. He told them that Lord Vrigu has promised to supply the Somras powder to Ayodhya in massive quantities. But how can Maharishi Vrigu promise that? Asked Karthik. Where will it come from? Is the manufacturing facility capable of producing so much more? It clearly must be, said Bhagirath. In any case, this offer is open only to the nobility, so the numbers will be small. Damn, said Ganesh. My thoughts precisely, said Bhagirath. This will allow them to remain alive for 100 more years. No amount of gold can compete with that. What do we do now? Asked Chandraketu. Prepare for war, said Ganesh. They will make earnest attempts to break the siege.